Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Internetic Method podcast. This is your host, Nicola, speaking with you here today. Today, I thought that we would start off with a general concept of accent reduction. I recently wrote a blog post about this called Accent Reduction 101, Practical Guide to Speaking Clearly and Confidently. And in this blog post, I ended up explaining what accent reduction really is, try to answer a lot of questions that people used to have or still have that have not been clearly answered in the past. So I figured that some people would appreciate having the chance to listen to this content instead of reading it, because a lot of people commute, a lot of people just don't have the time to sit down and go through a long text. And I tried to go really, really in depth about this. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about that a little bit. So most people who end up searching for info and try to get educated about accent reduction, they already understand the impact that pronunciation has on their communication. There's this frustration that my clients keep telling me about when they're in this position of having to repeat themselves, situations where they face professional limitations that come with being misunderstood. And once they know how accent reduction process really works, what realistic results look like, and how to choose the right approach, they are less hesitant to pursue it. It starts to make a lot of sense because, in all honesty, it's not something that gets talked about a whole lot unless you're a voice actor or you're in Hollywood, like a A-list celebrity, if you will. But we're going to explain all that today. And I wanted to just share some practical insights that might help people make informed decisions about accent modification journey. So let's start off with the basics. So what is accent reduction? So accent reduction, or we can also call it accent modification, neutralization. It goes by many names really, but it is the process of learning how to pronounce sounds in a way that makes their speech, the people's speech, more understood and more easily understood by native speakers. It's really about enhancing clarity and removing communication barriers, not really going for sounding like a native speaker, although that is a goal for some people, but it's not the end-all be-all desired outcome. What people really want to achieve is not having to repeat themselves. It's about improving voice projection. It's about engaging with your listeners, with your audience, if you're in that type of position, just in a more effective way. Now, a lot of people worry that reducing their accent or neutralizing it might mean that it's going to erase their identity or cultural heritage, but it really isn't the truth. The goal is really to give people more control over how they communicate, not to make them sound fake or sound like somebody else. So that really isn't a valid concern, if you will. Now, most people worry, how and where they're gonna, practice. And I think since COVID, people have gotten used to working from home, doing things at home, working out from home, meditating at home, and so on. So really, I think the home environment is really, really beneficial for anybody. Before applying their new skills and I guess more scrutinized settings, which allows them to build confidence in a familiar space. So what really the main benefit is that, for example, professionals, who want to see clarity in a workplace communication, they are very, very common, I would say, clients of mine. Students who are pursuing some academic or career goals are also there as well. General public, really, so people who want to feel more confident in social settings. And finally, public speakers, I think, who are aiming for maximum audience connection. So all of those people, all those groups are looking to develop those speaking skills that expands their communication options. Now, a lot of people wanted to ask and wanted to know, why is accent reduction important? Why is accent neutralization important in 2025? And the question is really, really good because there's an increased amount of conversation going on about diversity, inclusion, and so on. And hands down, there has been more inclusion than ever before in 2025. However, it does not mean that things are perfect. So today, we work in a global workspace, and it's not uncommon that you are, let's say, a native speaker from, let's say, the United States, and you end up having to work with people from, different countries in Europe or people from Asia. It just is very, very common. Uh, International companies have international workers. It's only logical, right? So being immediately understood really saves time and creates smoother interactions overall. Now, despite all of that, there is a really, really wonderful study done in 2024 from University of Chicago that found that professionals with clear pronunciation are 32% more likely to be recommended for leadership roles, even when all other qualifications were identical. So this is really interesting that regardless of how much we try to push and to fight for inclusion and diversity and so on, there is something called accent bias, and people will be biased whether they're conscious of it or not. There's a lot of conversation going on about unconscious bias in hiring, unconscious accent bias, and so on. So beyond those career implications, also, there's just a simple daily benefit of communicating without friction. So my clients, when they would come to me and start talking to me for the first time, they would tell me that they would have to mentally rehearse for the simplest of interactions, such as ordering coffee, making phone calls, asking for directions. They end up having to anticipate everything. And that really puts a mental strain. When you think about it, if you have to overthink every single move, every single word you're going to say, it really is draining. So that adjustment of your voice, depending on whether you're speaking inside a room or a different environment, is also kind of crucial. Conversation in a quiet room is not the same as conversation in a coffee shop. So once these people who come to my classes open up, and once we identify the sounds that they need to work on, and they end up having to practice and getting to practice, they describe this profound sense of freedom in everyday conversations. It is, like I said, reduced cognitive load. Allows them to focus on the content of their communication rather than the mechanics. Like nobody wants to think about how I should move my tongue or what should I do with my lower jaw. It just is draining. Now, how accent neutralization actually looks like, it's different. It is different from person to person. It is different from language to language, and my intention is to come up with various articles with different articles that are going to act like a how to lose your XX accent. So how to lose a Spanish accent, how to lose your Italian accent, how to lose your Indian accent. My intention was to build a series of both posts and podcasts episodes, so people can understand what the differences between languages are. And basically, for Spanish speakers, when I mention them, let's go ahead and expand upon that. So for Spanish speakers, accent modification might focus on distinguishing between long E sound and short E sound. So for example, a lot of them will say sheep instead of ship. And there are a number of examples we could go into now, but just to give you kind of a bird's eye overview of it, properly pronouncing y sound as opposed to j sound, which doesn't really exist in Spanish. So they will frequently say yes instead of yes. Mastering the natural rhythm of English sentences. That is different from rhythm of Spanish. For Indian speakers, we could talk about modifying the T's and D's because they are different than standardized American pronunciation. Adjusting vowel length and quality of words such as, bad versus bet. So the vowel length is really something that a lot of people struggle with. And finally, developing more variation in sentence intonation patterns. So when we talk about general American English, there's a lot of, I like to call it singing. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of rushing and lingering. And it's really not something that gets talked about enough. And finally, for Mandarin speakers, typical accent modification might address, things like, the difference between R and L sounds, or adding final consonants that do not exist in Mandarin, and implementing correct stress patterns in multiple syllable words. So, again, my intention is to go in deeper, much, much deeper, and to explore specific challenges that speakers from different countries face. But for right now, really, I want to go into the kind of mechanics of it and the process and the overall structure. So once the student shows up for their first class, what we typically end up doing is an initial assessment. English has 44 sounds, but nobody really needs to fix all 44 sounds in their pronunciation. It's mostly around 10 to 12. And so that first class is usually our initial assessment. So we evaluate the speech patterns to identify what sounds, rhythm patterns, intonation elements are responsible for creating a barrier. And this personalized assessment creates a roadmap. It really gives us a roadmap on what sounds we should be working on, what sounds we can completely disregard. It really is like a blueprint. Then, the pacing is actually very straightforward. We engage in weekly one-on-one sessions. So if, let's say, you are a non-native English speaker and you have to work on 8 sounds, you typically would have 8 lessons over the course of 8 weeks. So contrary to the popular belief, it really does not take eons, to improve your pronunciation and speech. But most people end up, successfully completing the program in right around 3 months, sometimes even less, depending on how many sounds it is that they need to work on. Now, the one-on-one sessions, they're typical, 60-minute sessions. We address one target sound per week, and we do a lot of back and forth, a lot of this is what you need to do with your lower jaw, this is what you need to do with your lips, this is what you need to do with your tongue. Your tongue should be doing this instead of this. And once, people understand what they do and what they need to do, really it's just going back and forth and doing that daily practice. It really isn't a rocket science. However, finding relevant and useful information in terms of what it is that people need to do when it comes to their mouth movements and their facial muscle movements, that's a tricky thing. The resources on the internet are just very, very limited. And yes, there are YouTube videos. Yes, there are tutorials. But in my experience, there's always something that lacks. And a lot of my speech language pathologist coworkers have agreed with me on this, that we get a lot of people who come to these classes and end up telling us about, oh, I've practiced with this app, or I did this and I did this, but at the end of the day, they still end up coming to an accent coach. So really, that is kind of your fastest way to get results. Once those students figure out what it is that they need to do, they typically have to engage in daily practice. And this is non-negotiable. This is the biggest needle mover. Between sessions, students need to spend at least 30 minutes, is my advice, of daily practice with customized audio exercises. The audio files that I provide and many other accent coaches provide are essential because they help you improve the pronunciation and intonation, and it is something that you can shadow, right? So that consistent daily practice is what actually rewires your muscle memory and creates that permanent change. And every few weeks, what we do is we record the speech to document improvements and adjust focus areas as needed. We do this because we want accountability and we want evidence of progress, not just illusion of progress. We really try to stay on top of things to the best of our ability, and the final step is the real world integration. So, as people master each new element in the practice, we want to go ahead and apply it to specific professional and personal contexts through targeted role playing and situational exercises. So this is kind of the structured approach that we have been using for a number of years now, and we really have gotten the most impactful results from this approach. So we do the assessment, we create a roadmap, we do weekly one-on-one sessions. There has to be daily practice so that new muscle memory is created, new neural links are created. We track the progress, and then we practice for real-world situations. So this is a short one, something a little that I wanted to share. In the next one, we are going to go a little bit more in depth in terms of a topic of how long does it take to lose your accent. Also, some of the tips and tricks that you can start using today, as long as answering some questions that people typically have, such as, do accent classes really work? And some other activities that actually help. So that's it for today. Thank you for your time and for your attention. I hope that this was informative. I will see you in the next one, where we talk about how long it is going to take to lose your accent. Once again, thank you for listening to the Internetic Method podcast. This is your host, Nicola, accent coach. If you have the need to work on your accent or pronunciation, feel free to hit me up on internetic.com. You can schedule a free accent assessment, and I will be very happy to take you through the entire process and help you improve your speech. Talk soon. Thank you.